Once upon a time, DeMarcus Cousins was regarded as the best center in the NBA, and with good reason. On the offensive end, he was the complete package with the ability to bully defenders down low, face up and hit the mid-range jumper, and even step out and hit the three at a high clip. He was also a very adept playmaker at the center position, being able to pass out of either the high or the low post, as well as up on the perimeter. However, it seemed that as quickly as he rose to prominence, he fell even faster. If I were to summarize DeMarcus Cousins' career in one word, it would be a tragedy. Looking back at his time in Sacramento, in all honesty, nothing went right for Cousins. Early on in his career, he butted heads with his head coach Paul Westphal and was blamed by the media for it, and they never let it go. They labeled Cousins as a coach killer and a hothead, something that stuck with him throughout his 8-year career with the Kings. He then played under Keith Smart and eventually his favorite coach Mike Malone in the 2013-14 season, and while it seemed that Malone had found the secret to the team's success after a 9-5 start to the 2014-15 season, and seemed to develop a great relationship with Cousins, the team's best player, the Kings for some odd reason decided to fire Malone. This angered Cousins and further damaged his relationship with the Kings and resulted in him publicly lashing out at the front office saying, "We're not the same team since Malone's firing." George Karl would later replace Malone, and the two would have one of the most dysfunctional player-coach relationships in the league, with Cousins publicly criticizing Karl and Karl advocating for Cousins to be traded on numerous occasions. Karl would end up being fired, and Cousins would end his tenure with Sacramento under Dave Yeager. Many will look to blame Cousins, calling him a coach killer, hothead, and non-leader, as the reason why the Kings never made the playoffs during his time there. However, I'd like to argue that this was far from the truth. During his time there, Cousins was a monster doing everything he could, averaging 21.2 points, 10.8 rebounds, 3.2 assists, 1.4 steals, and 1.2 blocks. Unfortunately, even with his elite play, Cousins never had any coaching stability or a solid team around him, with his best teammates being either Rudy Gay or Rajon Rondo to go along with a weak bench. Luckily for Cousins, he was traded to the New Orleans Pelicans at the 2017-18 deadline. During his time in New Orleans, Cousins arguably formed the NBA's best 1-2 punch, teaming up with Anthony Davis and arguably the best frontcourt of the modern NBA. Both were a terror to match up with, as they were versatile big men on the offensive end who could score from anywhere on the court, resulting in a lot of high-low action between the two. They were also very versatile on the defensive end and could defend both the perimeter and the post. Add these two elements together along with Drew Holiday and Rajon Rondo, as well as shooters Etuan Moore and Nikola Jokic, and the Pelicans had a very nice squad built around their two superstars. And it seemed that this experiment would be a success, as during the 2017-18 season, the Pelicans were 27-21. However, this was when tragedy struck, as Cousins suffered a season-ending Achilles injury in the closing minutes of a game against the Houston Rockets. The Pelicans did end up making the playoffs that year, which would have been Cousins' first playoff appearance of his career. During the offseason, Cousins himself expected to receive a max deal after averaging 25 points, 12.7 rebounds, 5 assists, 1.6 steals, and 1.5 blocks during his time in New Orleans, but his Achilles surgery did a lot more damage to his stock than expected. The best deal he received during the free agent period was a 2-year, $40 million deal from the Pelicans. Believing that he was worth more than that, Cousins decided that he would sign with the Warriors instead on a 1-year, $5.3 million deal. Many people were outraged by this decision, but in hindsight, it seemed like the best thing for Cousins. By signing with the Warriors and the best team in the league, he would be able to compete for a championship while being treated by one of the league's top medical staff, and he would be able to rebuild his stock given that he had a solid season. However, even with all of this, Cousins received a lot of hate for his decision and was deemed a ring chaser. Cousins would appear in just 30 games that year for the Warriors, and given how many scoring options there were on the team with Steph, KD, and Klay, Cousins' numbers took a major hit compared to his time in New Orleans. He only put up 16.3 points, 8.2 rebounds, and 3.6 assists, but it's worth noting that he did do this in just 25.7 minutes per game. When looking at Cousins' play, you can see that he was taking steps in the right direction, showing that he was still a contributor on the offensive end of the court. However, not everything was perfect, as he seemed to step slow on defense, which used to be serviceable before the injury, but now he was seen as a defensive liability. Nevertheless, everyone was happy to see Boogie back on the court, and yet, even after all the rehab, after all the time spent recovering, his body betrayed him yet again. In just his second career playoff game against the Clippers, he suffered a torn quad. A lot of players would have been extremely discouraged, perhaps taking the rest of the playoffs off. However, with Cousins, much like before, he worked his ass off and was able to return during the NBA Finals. However, he did struggle, averaging just 8.3 points and 4.7 rebounds on 42.5% shooting. And finally, we enter the 2018-19 offseason, where we all know Cousins was unable to find that big contract he sought after. Once again, Cousins chose the path of signing with a contender, this time with the Lakers, reuniting with his old teammate Anthony Davis along with LeBron James. On paper, the Lakers seemed unstoppable with the addition of Cousins, who was continuing rehab on his quad. But once again, once Cousins was able to get back on the court, he couldn't catch a break, tearing his left ACL while in a workout at Las Vegas. Imagine being in Cousins' shoes. Imagine working your ass off for 2 straight years, trying to get back from injury only to be tripped up by setbacks over and over again. Many NBA players would have retired. 2 major injuries in 2 years with that kind of body, that's just unheard of. In fact, it's a tragedy. Another extremely talented player lost to injury. Do I believe that Cousins will be able to make a return to the NBA? I think so, because of his reputation and offensive skill set. I think he'll still have some offensive game left in him, as he's retained his passing vision, so he'll definitely be useful to a team. However, what I am extremely worried about is his defense, especially when switched onto faster guards. I think he'll definitely be blown by super easily. I'm also suspect of his jumper, because at his size and the nature of his injuries, he'll definitely have lost a lot of lift, which would greatly affect his jumper. The same can be said for his rebounding, as he won't be able to get as high as he used to. Mentally, it will be extremely tough for Cousins as well, as he'll have to definitely adjust his game to the new capabilities, or lack thereof, of his body. But I think I speak for a lot of people when I say I would love to see Cousins back on the court, even if he's not as dominant as his former self, because the NBA is just a better place with him on the court. With all that being said, let me know in the comments below if you think Cousins will be able to find another contract in the league, or if he won't. Thank you very much for watching, and I appreciate all the support. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, turn on post notifications so you know when I upload next. But with all that being said, have a good day, or night, wherever you are.